I know I'm not supposed to do this because Jordan Peterson warned us about those icky postmodern neo-Marxists, but today we are going to do a Derridian and postmodern analysis of the road. I'm breaking taboos with the taboo breaking system itself today. And as I talked about in my previous video on the Grail myth and the road, there's this redemptive arc at the heart of the road. And I'm a sucker just like you guys. I love the whole carry the fire thing, and the boy lives on and is the moral compass, and there is a form of purity redemption happening with him. However, I don't think the idea of redemption in the novel is that straightforward. Because is the concept of redemption even real in a world that is irredeemable? And I don't want to go full Wittgenstein on you guys right now, but Wittgenstein basically argues that, quote, if the distinction between correct and seems correct has disappeared, then so has the concept of correct. And when we look at words like, for instance, redemption and good, the reason they exist and have meaning is because of the community consensus. And let's not have a debate on private versus public language on Cormac McCarthy video. But when the father dies, the boy gets shacked up with some randos, and we don't know if they are actually on the good side, if they're going to eat him later or like do terrible things to him. We're assuming they are. They got a dog and some kids. It's like all good fun. But do they actually understand the concept of good that was taught to the boy? And now that his father is gone and he's existing in this isolated world, unless he pushes on that concept of good, others won't understand. And we are now kind of moving into the Derridian complex at the heart of a lot of different issues within the road. And I'm smiling right now because when we talk about Derrida's paradox, or the Derridian idea of difference, this is like, I feel like I'm back doing my undergrad again. I'm just like trolling professors because this is like so easy to do. And that's why it's so popular. But Derrida would say that the traditional idea of redemption has to rely on binary oppositions, good versus evil, saved versus damned, life versus death, and so on. However, the whole idea of deconstruction and postmodernism in general calls these binaries into play and suggests that meaning is not necessarily fixed, but that it's deferred. And that kind of maybe goes against the whole Wittgenstein and public language thing I was talking about before, but maybe that's the Derridian paradox within the Derridian paradox in this video. So the first thing we're going to be talking about is the idea of apocalyptic time. I know that, like, how cool does that sound? So in a traditional narrative, a modernist or like whatever narrative, there's a concept of linear time. This is usual in a typical apocalyptic story. We're usually put in at a fixed point, and we kind of move through, and maybe we get some flashbacks, but we're moving through kind of a linear analysis, and the road seems very linear. However, in the road, time is disrupted. As you remember, the clocks do not work. Whether that is the caldera or the nuclear bomb is up to debate, but the time has ceased to exist. Days blend into night. Seasons are not distinguishable other than maybe just about through some temperature changes because they are, existing in this ashen landscape. And even crazier, time doesn't even exist because the past, present, and future are all coalesced into one experience of suffering. And this disruption of the linearity of time in the novel, which is very covert, like this isn't some postmodernist, like fractal novel, but time, just like meaning, one could argue, is always deferred. It's always in flux, especially when we're looking at this, where we are existing all the time in the past event, the cataclysmic event, and the future, which is the fate of humanity. And you could say we're existing in that at all times, but this is very up in your face, and that's what the novel is doing. It's presenting these problems very close. I worry about the world, but I don't worry about it like this. I'm not confronted with this when everything around me in my world is almost perfect. And another idea that we can kind of add is the Nietzschean idea of eternal recurrence, where when we have like time, right, like things progress, but we have kind of moved in the story, we move back to the same exact events. And that's one of the critiques of the road as a novel, is that it's just very repetitive, right? We have to find food. We have to avoid danger. There's cannibals. Oh, I'm sick. Oh, we got to keep going. Oh, be a good kid. And when we're talking about the morality of the story, there's this a Derridian idea of like undecidability, and he uses a different term. I just can't remember, and I can't bother to look up. I'm trying to recover from years of just studying postmodernism all the time. However, it's the idea that we're kind of moving into this world where the choices we make will have no assurance or no moral clarity. And you're already seeing that now. Like everything that we are doing really may not be validated in the future because it will be obsolete. And that's something new to our reality. Like choices and ideas that you had in 1840 were probably going to be the same in 1870 outside of like the industrial technological revolution. A lot of things were going to remain very similar. And so when we look at God in the novel, God is obviously not very present. We don't really hear them praying to God. They have the whole carry the fire motif, but God isn't like this thing. It's not like a Christian. They're not praying to Jesus. And Cormac McCarthy in the novel says there is no God and we are his prophets. And that's like one of the bigger lines in the novel. And so with Derrida, there was this idea of the trace, which is a concept that Derrida uses to describe how the absence of an element can be as significant as its presence. And this is really big with like the specter of Marx and like this is where we get super trippy. But in The Road, God is absent, yet this absence haunts the narrative. The absence of God is a tracer. It's a spectral, the word that Marx likes to use. Excuse me, not Marx, Derrida, presence that influences the actions, thoughts, and morality of the novel. If this doesn't make sense, just imagine the metaphor of God has left like a vacuum, a black hole, and the characters and the other people in the world have to navigate this to find meaning and moral guidance. In our world, it's somewhat easy to find meaning and moral guidance. It's all around us, even back at the earliest of time. But with the idea of apocalyptic time and stuff, this becomes harder. And this resonates with Derrida's critique of logocentrism, the idea that there's a central or divine logos or word that gives meaning to the world. In the absence of such a divine center, the characters must grapple with the world that defines easy explanation or moral categorization. So another thing that we can view through a Derridian lens, as we see on the screen right now, is the father and son relationship. Their relationship isn't necessarily traditional because we have the father who is supposed to be the strong one, and then we have the weak one. We have the father who's supposed to be the protector versus the protected. However, the father is the one who's being morally guided by the son. Sometimes he's being provided by his son. And if we wanted, like I said, to go full Derridian here, this could be a challenge. I have to come back on the screen to the family role, to the traditional nuclear family norms of, sex, gender, all the other stuff the postmodernists love to bash and erase from society. And even bigger than that, our assumptions and our expectations, all the great buzzwords of postmodernism. And I might be, I like to make fun of postmodernism, and they have a lot, and they've screwed up a lot of things, but a lot of it is very true. Like, that's what the whole point of a binary is. That's the whole point of the mother and the father and the two political parties, is that both are most of the time equally as wrong. And sorry to get political here, but the closed-mindedness of one side and the open-mindedness on one side are just two sides of the same coin and are equally as crazy when you look at them from an outside point of view. So who wants to take this further? Who wants to add some fire, some postmodernist fire to this kind of introductory critique of postmodernism and The Road? What did I miss? What do you guys have to say? Like I said, is this how Cormac McCarthy wants us to interpret this? No, but I don't think he wants us to interpret or talk about his novels in any way anyway. So why not talk about one of the most popular ways of deconstructing novels and literature around, which is the postmodernist way. And if you guys haven't already seen my The Grail Myth and The Road video, which kind of explores a more traditional view of The Road, then go check that out.